The Me-262 and P-51 Mustang represented the state-of-the-art in terms of design, performance, and combat capability for their respective air forces, making its operational debut in the summer of 1944, and powered by the Jumo 004 jet engine. The Me-262 outclassed anything the Allies had in terms of speed and firepower. However, the availability of both machines and trained pilots was becoming an insurmountable problem for the Luftwaffe. Meanwhile, in the P-51, fitted with the Rolls-Royce, Packard, Merlin engine and drop tanks, the USAAF finally had a fighter that had the legs to escort its heavy bombers deep into Reich airspace and back for well over 1,000 miles. Furthermore, if flown to its strengths, the P-51 was more than capable of taking on the feared Me-262 on an equal footing, despite the differences in power plant and top speed. In fact, the Mustang would prove to be the Luftwaffe fighter arm's nemesis, one of the earliest known engagements between a P-51 and a Me-262 took place on August 20 when a Mustang pilot reported spotting a ship similar to an 820. The pilot went on to describe how the jet turned into the sun from 6 o'clock. We turned into this attack, but due to the tremendous speed of the enemy aircraft, I was unable to get my guns on him. We easily outmaneuvered him, and when he dived past us, I realized the enemy aircraft was jet-propelled. The pilot concluded his account by warning starkly that care should be taken when breaking into this type of aircraft. The break should start much sooner than is necessary when fighting Me-109S or FW-190S. This is due to the tremendous speed of the enemy aircraft. As told by Robert Forsyth in his book Me-262 versus P-51 Mustang. Since August 1944, the USAAF had been aware that the Luftwaffe had started to deploy the Me-262 in small numbers over the Western Front, in both the fighter and bomber roles. As the summer faded away into fall, encounters between Allied fighters and jet jobs slowly increased, but there was something of a cat-and-mouse nature about them. It would not be until October 7th that a Mustang jockey would claim the first Me-262 scalps. Commando Nowotny had commenced operational flying 4 days earlier, although its first mission of any strength was not mounted until the 7th, when a formation of Me-262S led by Ace Hauptmann Georg Peter Eder prepared to take off from Achmur to intercept enemy bombers attacking oil targets. As the jets began to move across the concrete taxiways, one of Eder's Jumo engines suffered a flameout, and he was forced to abort. 3 other Me-262S, flown by Oberleutnant Paul Bley, Lieutenant Gerhard Robert, and Oberfähnrich Heinz Russell, continued to taxi out for takeoff, but at that moment the P-51D of 361st FG pilot 1LT Urban L. Drew swooped down. Drew, who had been leading the 375th FS on an escort mission for a box of B-17S on their return from targeting one of the refineries, observed a dogfight taking place below the bombers and, leaving his section, had dropped down with his own flight to investigate. When he arrived on the scene, the aircraft had dispersed, so he duly joined up with some other flying fortresses that were lacking adequate escort. As the formation passed over Achmur, Drew spotted 2 Me-262S on the airfield. For a few moments, he monitored their progress. The lead ship was in takeoff position on the east-west runway, and the taxiing ship got into position for a formation takeoff. I waited until they were both airborne and then rolled over from 15,000 feet and headed for the attack. With my flight behind me, I caught up with the second Me-262 when he was about 1,000 feet off the ground. I was indicating 450 miles per hour, and the jet aircraft could not have been going over 200 miles per hour. I started firing from about 400 yards, with 30 degrees deflection. As I closed on him, I observed hits all over the wings and fuselage. This was probably Lieutenant Cobert's aircraft, which blew up just as it lifted off the ground. Drew flew his P-51 straight through the flames and scattering debris of his victim. Just as I passed him, I saw a sheet of flame come out near the right wing root. As I glanced back, I saw a gigantic explosion, and a sheet of red-orange flame shot out over an area of about 1,000 feet. The other jet aircraft was about 500 yards ahead of me, and had started a fast climbing turn to the left. I was still indicating about 400 miles per hour, and I had to haul back on the stick to stay with him. It is unclear who was flying the Me-262, which collapsed under the P-51's machine gun fire, but it may have been Oberfähnrich Russell. Drew recounted, I had started shooting from about 60 degrees deflection at 300 yards and my bullets were just hitting the tail section of the enemy aircraft. I kept horsing back on the stick, and my bullets crept up the fuselage to the cockpit. Just then I saw the canopy go flying off in 2 sections, and the plane rolled over and went into a flat spin. He hit the ground on his back at about a 60-degree angle. I did not see the pilot bail out. The enemy aircraft exploded violently, and as I looked back at the 2 wrecks, there were 2 mounting columns of black smoke. Amidst the chaos on the runway, Oberleutnant Blay crashed his aircraft, although he was able to escape. One LT Drew claimed, and despite the failure of his gun camera to record the action on film, was eventually credited with the destruction of 2 Me-262s. The war against the jets intensified in November, as the Luftwaffe increased its sortie rate with the Me-262. Oberfähnrich Willy Banahaf of 3/Commando Nowotny was forced to bail out after an encounter with P-51s over Holland on the first day of the month. While 24 hours later, there was some cheer when a P-51 and a P-47 were shot down by Feldwebel Erich Butner. However, this event was tempered by the loss of 3 more jets to Mustangs on November 4th. Worse was to come on the afternoon of Nov. 8 when Major Walter Nowotny, the commando's renowned leader and one of the most highly decorated pilots in the Luftwaffe, finally took off to engage the enemy in a Me-262. The ace shot down a 4-engined bomber and a P-51 for his 257th and 258th victories. But as he returned home, he was apparently intercepted by Mustangs believed to have been flown by one LT Edward Buddy Haydon of the 357th FG and ace-capped Ernest C. Feeblecorn of the 20th FG, each of whom have been credited with a shared kill. Whatever the case, a short while later Nowotny's crackling voice was heard over the radio. Adolf Galland witnessed events from the ground, and Me-262 appeared out of the cloud and dived vertically into the ground. There was black smoke and an explosion. Nowotny's last words, though garbled, indicated that his aircraft was hit and on fire, and seconds later he crashed to his death.